Hey guys, and welcome back to another Saturday here on Trekyards. I'm Captain Foley.
I am Kamal Cookins. Welcome back, guys.
And today we have a very interesting topic to discuss. We like doing things like comparing this and that, yin and yang. We looked at the Klingon D7 and the Katinga. We've examined those in detail. It was a really fun episode, so we thought, why not do that again? So today we're going to be taking a look at one of my least favorite ships, and comparing it to one that I actually don't mind so much. But they're almost identical. So I don't know what's wrong with my brain, but every time I've looked through these pictures, Anyway, Samuel, what are we doing today?
We are taking a look at we did the Exo 1 and the refit. Well, this is the Excelsior class and its refit, the Enterprise B. And these amazingly detailed 3D models, both used for Eagle and Moss, although Rob Bonchoon, who customized the Enterprise B version, changed it, made it a bit more accurate even since then. So these are, I think, the highest quality models of these two ships you can get. So we're very pleased. These don't take this as 100% canon, but the guys that made these models really tried to get you as close as possible. So I would take these as, as close in CG as you can get. The differences, similarities, let's see. And are they the same as, or it's different as we think? But this first picture, Stuart, I did a little beauty shot of the two ships. Very, very similar. And even while rendering this episode, I'll give something away straight away. There is something I never noticed that does actually change the feel for me. And these are all small things you want to look at because you don't often see them both together, or you have never seen them both together, and that's the fun bit. But taking this picture, Stuart, they're both ships. I mean, what's wrong with the Excelsior? She's beautiful, man.
Well, that's what floored me about looking through these pictures real quick before this episode started. Is how similar they are, and yet, like I said, the Excelsior, I look at it and I'm just not impressed. The Enterprise B, and I'm like, hey, I like that. And I've had this discussion actually like a month ago, 2 weeks ago, with a friend of mine, Blappy. He prefers the sleek simpleness of the Excelsior over the bulky Enterprise B, and we had this debate too. So I don't know. Really, I mean, once we start talking about details, it might spark something in my mind as to why I like the B so much better. But off the hop, I mean, just looking at them, there's more going on the B, and I think that's what catches my eye. I don't know if that's just that first impression of the Excelsior, like this could be the ship replacing the Enterprise, and I wasn't happy with that as a kid. And Captain Styles and his helmsman were just assholes. So I don't know if that's part of it as well. So.
For me, I think the Excelsior, I mean, to come up with the next ship after the Enterprise, we really only seen the Matt Jeffries design, then the Andrew Probert and team design of the Enterprise refit. Yes, the Miranda came out, but that wasn't the next Enterprise, that was a different design. The Excelsior was the next in the, not line, but that style of ship pushed forward. And so to take something actually looking so familiar, yet so radically different in many ways, and I think very, very, very nice to keep it so close yet dissimilar, and then the Enterprise B variation. I think I like the B. I mean, the Eagle Moss models I use an example. The Excelsior is very sort of thin and it feels fine, but yeah, the B has this bulk, has this extra sense of oomph. I think the Enterprise B is potentially a more I don't want to say bad things. I think the Excelsior works very well as a design, but the B might have that extra bit of physical, technical usefulness in the field, like that extra oomph of usefulness, of advancement, of, there's extra impulse engines, obviously, we're going to talk about in a minute. Just that one feature alone gives it a huge advantage, And when maneuverability and firing arcs are quite important, that's pretty important. But yeah, I mean, Stuart, what are the obvious differences then? Well, we can throw a couple out and then we'll circle back. But what are the most obvious differences between the Excelsior and the Enterprise B? And it's worth double mentioning because we like being informative here. The Excelsior class was in development for some time, obviously, but it was first seen in Star Trek 3, which was in 2285. That was the transwarp prototype, Excelsior. A few years later, it was launched as the Excelsior and Excelsior class, but that was its first, it's
iteration.
pretty much yeah, pretty much operational state. So that's 2285, and then in 2293, the Enterprise B, the refit, was launched. So not very long after. 5, 2 to 3, so that's 8 years. So, well, I guess, what do you think about an 8-year refit cycle, especially considering the Enterprise Classic was 20 years from Cage to TOS, and then like 10-ish years to the refit?
Yeah. I like to think that this is not so much a refit as it is an upgrade. It's not a total ship overhaul and refit like the Enterprise was. That was a very huge project to undertake. They basically rebuilt a brand new ship on the old substructure. This one seems more like just upgrading systems. It doesn't seem like a refit to me. I would call this an upgrade, not a refit, personally. But I think the 8 years for that works perfectly. The Excelsior we saw in Star Trek 3, like you said, was the experimental test bed for the transwarp. So it wasn't necessarily a finished design. There would still be modifications and stuff made during testing to, get optimal performance, things like that.
Well, it's kind of amazing then that the Excelsior didn't go through any changes, not any big. I mean, went through a couple of subtle ones, but nothing big, nothing in the engines. Between 3 and 6, we see her as the NCC version. Considering the swap from transwarp to warp, I guess everything transwarp is internal. Well, they said you still need a warp coils. I know it looks transwarp, but we want to look at these things fresh every time. But having you have the same warp coils, or they replace inner coils. I mean, it's a odd thing to look so different. So if this was the Star Trek 6 version, Enterprise B, then you can say that, hey, the original version needed this design, whereas then the ship of the line, the standard iteration version, the warp version, looked like this. So it's kind of odd then to go from very few changes to then this upgrade. Although I would argue this is more of a refit, because the Connie refit was more of a complete remake. I mean, it was not refitting everything. It took most things away, put new things on everything. That was a rebirth. This is refitting some components and then adding a few things to the hull. This is what is a more classical refit, I'd say. Like the Enterprise E, or D. Those get things that refitted with new improvements. But it's not, radically rechanging the hull.
Yeah, well, I like to think, if you believe in the Phase 2 Enterprise, I think that's more of an upgrade. Testing new systems, new engines, kind of like this. It's got new engines, it's got a few new components, but it's basically the main ship, just adding new equipment. And then the refit was a complete rip down and refit. So I see refit as more like kind of ripping off the old hull plating and rebuilding, as opposed to adding elements.
Well, this is that step in between, because you've got, I mean, most of the hull is identical. They've just swapped out and added a few elements. This is I guess an in between. This is a mini refit or a major upgrade. There you go, Stuart. Compromise.
Perfect. I like it.
But Stuart, take us into the changes, and we'll go through them. What's the first biggest one, do you think?
Well, I'm just gonna start off by saying there's mainly three large changes that are noticeable immediately. That's the addition to the secondary hull. That's the first thing that stands out.
Yep.
Depending on which angle you're looking at it, the warp nacelles, and then the impulse engine upgrades. So those are the three main ones. But the first one we'll talk about, let's say, is the secondary hull, because it's the most noticeable, and it was actually done for a specific purpose. Well, in real life anyway, not so much in universe. But let's talk about that one first. So it's got more of a boat-like kind of appendage growing out of it. I rather like it. A lot of people really complain that was just, feels very tacked on. And we know that John Eaves did do that so that, well, first it would differentiate his design, but mainly because they needed a piece of the ship to break off, and they didn't want to damage the original model of the Excelsior.
Even though they did.
Even though they did. Yeah. With the glue they put on, they ruined the original model. But still, so that part that gets struck by the Nexus ribbon, adding that, I don't know why I like that so much, but it just adds that bulk. I don't like the line of the Excelsior coming down from the neck right through to the secondary hull the way it does. Maybe it's because I'm so used to the refit and stuff before that, where it's kind of a more abrupt change. And I think this kind of it kind of speaks to that abrupt change in look, not so sleek. I don't know why I like it, but I think it adds additional engineering elements, which would have actually made more sense in the Excelsior, considering it was a new engineering system with transwarp. But yeah, I really like the addition of that boat bottom, as people call it. So
yeah, it is bulky, but in a sort of functional way. Like again, obviously, practical reason why it was there to be blown off, but in the universe, it's quite a oddly full-on piece. That confidence of it being put there means it's pretty essential, has a lot more functional area, and actually the way it curves in is quite interesting. Now from this angle, the close-up, or 007, it doesn't look as good, sort of as straight on, but again, everything doesn't look good from every angle. That first picture where we see both ships together, I think it really works well. I think it really adds that level, that something else. And if you look at the comparative nature of the Excelsior version, you're right, very smooth, bigger deflector. That the Enterprise Z, technology improves, shrunk deflector, I guess a bit more assessed.
And also shrunken torpedo tubes.
Yes. Now these are the same 3D model, but then updated to be the Enterprise B, so that geometry has been altered. That intrigues me, given that torpedoes are a set size. Does that mean they were huge in this one, or does that mean maybe they need to get less, when a torpedo comes out, it does use plasma as a plasma trail. Maybe it needed more of a hole for the plasma to escape from the backwash. That could be a smaller tube, or was it built bigger? It does seem a bit odd.
It does. It makes me wonder if there's a real size difference between these two, which I'm pretty sure there isn't. But you could be right. You could, because we know that in TOS the torpedoes were blue, and in the movies they went to red. And with this kind of recessed torpedo tube, perhaps with the new red plasma they're using or whatever, the early ones needed that more bigger flange at the front to kind of get that torpedo out. And that's when the Enterprise B came around, they've refined it, so they made, I don't know.
Because the Enterprise refit doesn't have any recessed its tubes. Right. It's literally just doors that again, boom, it fires very straightforwardly. Although I will note that comparing these two again, the Excelsior, you can see how many windows it has. The Enterprise B actually adds some more windows to the top element, and also to the new zone. So I think it has some more living spaces, although that's all the deflector control. So I guess the fact that it was made such a big deal of in the film, that deflector must be a pretty important part of the structure. If that was deflector control, that new bit is the deflector control. Either they've tried to, give a dedicated deflector control space, which is why they've added a new zone, taken the space that was being utilised by it and given something else in the hull, or they've now really beefed it up. Deflector might be part of the new warp, giving them those higher warp speeds. This was the Enterprise, the ship of the fleet, the best out there, flagship. I think it was a flagship at this point. Yeah, so big deflector. Deflectors are pretty damn useful for a lot of things. So,
yeah, they got more useful over the years too. Going up to TNG, they're multifunctional.
One interesting thing about this picture, and you can see going towards the Enterprise B to the Excelsior, there's quite a few visible changes here, and one we'll hit later is the warp engines. But there's one interesting one that I don't know if you even noticed, Stuart. I didn't originally. But if you go from the Excelsior, take a look at that middle bit. The pretty different and unique neck area. There's lots of black slits. Well, if we slowly fade into the Enterprise B, and then back, and then to the Excelsior, what do you see, Stuart? Because I noticed something. As I was rendering these, I think you'll notice it through every picture. What's the difference, Stuart?
The neck on the B is more squat. It lowers the saucer, I believe, a little bit. And I like that a lot. I like the detailing on the Enterprise B neck. Like you said, it's more fin-like. It does have fins on the Excelsior too, but I don't like the texturing on them. I don't know. It looks so much better on the B, and it's so subtle and so not as different. It's amazing how a little change to my eye makes it so much better.
Well, if you go to the first picture of both ships, you can see both necks. You can't see a difference. If you go to the first picture, the top view, start the Excelsior, go to the B. It's rendering the exact same perspective, the exact same angle. Go between the two, and suddenly you can see that the saucer's actually dropping because the neck is actually a few slices less. They cut a few out. Back to the neck picture again. It's like I said, it's a few less. They redesigned it slightly. They're more stout. One interesting thing they did is that if you actually look at a side view of the nacelles or the slices, The Excelsior, they're very close together. There's this substance between them. It's little grilling. The Enterprise B version, there's a lot more space between them, so you can see right through in some elements. And here's another render of literally side view it, you can see right through those slits. It's far more distinct in the Excelsior. And again, if these renders if these ships are to be believed, the hull is more shiny and more metallic than sort of matte, which gives it a different feel. It kind of integrates into the hull better than sticking out as much. Again, this is renders and 3D models, but again, the guys that build these were very wanting to get these things right. If you go to the side view of both ships, a little bit difficult to see, but you can see there is a little bit just of a shrinkage, and it does change the feel slightly. And it's one of those things where it's difficult to put your finger on, but it does alter the feel.
Yeah, it is very subtle, but on that side view you can see that the Enterprise B saucer is lower. Also, it's got a more... Well, no, it doesn't. I was going to say it had a more angled neck than the Excelsior, which seems to be more straight, but it's just because it's darker, I can't really see it. So, but no, oh man, it's so subtle, but I think it makes it more streamlined. I don't know. See, it's amazing how just taking that little slice of neck out just changes the overall look. And I think it's more subconscious than anything, because like you said, for most angles you can't even tell. And I didn't even know this until we started this episode that was the case. But I think that's one of the reasons that I like it better, is it pulls the ship more together and it looks less gangly.
Yeah, interesting enough, and this side view is really, that Excelsior, actually, if that's again correct, and again these guys try to make it look correct, that side view is so much neck, and it does have a distinct bloop, plug and play, this is full on neck. Limitation in tech, who knows? Maybe bulk it up. That was a problem with the Enterprise. Well, Enterprise is the refit in the Connie line. But this one, this is very classically, John Eves almost, Enterprise Z, having it integrated. This is before his Enterprise Z, but into the idea of integration, the idea of that's where tech was going, not necessarily in this line, but I guess at the time they were designing these things a bit more, because Voyager and such, those all start sort of maybe in the minds. That was the future anyway. But yeah, it pulls it right down, much more efficient mission profile, I guess. And they've also lost the fins on top of the saucer, but actually gained fins on top of the engines, which actually somehow gives it a better line of, now it's in line with itself. It rebalances those lines. Yeah, it works. It works really well. And I wonder why they did. My assumption, they didn't want to break the model, but I'm assuming a neck is reasonably easy to reassemble and not. I'm assuming when they put the electronics in for the impulse engines, they had to then hollow out parts of maybe the saucer to put them in to swap it around, and then to put a new neck in was to allow for different electronics to go in, maybe. They just rebuilt the neck to allow things to exist differently, because it was, different electronics.
Possibly. I would love to talk to somebody that worked on the actual physical model and find out exactly how much effort went into changing it, because like we said, they didn't want to change the original Excelsior model. They didn't want to damage it, but to alter it the way they did, I just want to know the process behind that, because I think that'd be very interesting to hear that kind of that process for sure.
Well, I've got a question for you though, Stuart. Look at these two pictures side by side, and often you don't really see these things side by side. Is it identical ship, or is it a ship where you really only need to look at the details to see it being different, or does it have a different feel when all the differences are combined? Because I think both as I look at this. Depends how my brain is wired at that time.
My gut reaction is different, and the reason I say that is because like I said, I like one and I don't like the other, and they're exactly the same. But I think there's so many little subtle things that just make it a different ship. I don't know. I've now pulled them up side by side, so I got both on the screen. And it's when you do that and you just go from one to the other, you don't really see the differences. But when you switch between on the slideshow between the two, back and forth really quick, you go, oh my god, there's so many little subtle changes that speak to the overall aesthetic of the ship. But to just see it you don't notice them all, and it's amazing how that works. I don't know if it's just, I don't know. I mean, John Eves is brilliant the way that he did these changes and made it more accessible to certain people. I know a lot of people hate the B. I know a lot of people hate the B because of the additions to the Excelsior model, but I don't know. I think it's a different. I see different ship right away.
That is this week's Trekyards done and dusted. Next week we've got another great part.
Yes, the continuation next week. Tune in.
So 7 days and just click on that link. So we'll see you then.
See you then, guys.